Okay, I'm going to share the screen now. Okay, I think we can begin with I'll begin with the salutation to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Holy One, the fully enlightened one. Okay, we've been going through the sequential training as laid out in this sutta from the Majjhima Nikaya, number 27, the discourse on the elephant's footprint simile. Yeah, today we'll be coming to the end portion of the gradual training. But I just want to do first a quick overview of the material that we've already covered. Okay, so we went through the conditions for the sequential training, which is the appearance of a Buddha in the world and his teaching of the Dharma. And here the Buddha is going to show the monastic path. And so he takes a disciple who gains faith in the Buddha and then goes forth into homelessness. Having gone forth into the homeless life, the disciple now undertakes the principles of moral training laid out for the monastics. So here we have right action, right speech, and then the various minor ethical observances. And then we have a number of intermediate steps as preparations for the practice of meditation. So these include contentment, restraint of the sense faculties, then clear mindfulness and clear comprehension in all activities. And then from there, we have the going into seclusion, going into a secluded dwelling place. This would be a place suitable for intensive meditation practice. And then the disciple abandons or overcomes the 5 mental hindrances. So I dealt with this in more detail in the previous class. And then once the 5 hindrances are overcome, then the disciple enters and masters the 4 jhanas. Okay, so that is as far as we got in the last class. So that was the second class on the sequential training. Okay, and now we come to the final section, the final major section, which will be on what are called the 3 clear knowledges, or Pali. And these will culminate in the attainment of arahatship, the state of full liberation. But before we come to the actual text of the sutta, I want to make it clear that there are different types of arahats depending on the achievements they have in addition to arahatship. So this has a list of the different types of arahats, and I'll begin at the bottom of this list. This are practitioners who attain arhatship without the jhanas, though of course they need a certain minimum degree of samadhi or concentration. And then based on that basic minimum samadhi, they practice insight meditation and thereby attain arhatship. These types of arhats are called liberated by wisdom, but also more specifically, they're called dry insight arhats. This is because the jhana is considered a kind of moisture for the mind. But those who attain arhatship without jhana don't have that moisture, so they're called dry insight. Okay, next up, there are those who achieve arhatship with the attainment of the jhanas, based on the jhanas, and it could be anything from 1 to 4 jhanas. But they don't attain the formless absorptions. And so these arhats are called liberated by wisdom. So they're liberated by wisdom, and they can have any jhana attainment from 1 to 4 jhanas. Okay, going up, the next type of arhat attains the formless absorptions. These are like the base of boundless space, base of boundless consciousness, and so on. So this type of arhat is called both ways liberated, because they're liberated through the power of their samadhi and through the power of their wisdom. Okay, then there are arhats who acquire certain types of, maybe you call these supernormal powers. So we don't have to go into this in detail, but they include various kinds of psychic powers, the power of mind reading, and others. Yeah, and then there are arhats who attain arhatship together with what are called these 3 clear knowledges. So in the sutta on the elephant's footprint simile, the Buddha is going to describe the arhat who achieve, or the practitioner who achieves arhatship with the 3 clear knowledges. Yeah, and this is the process that the Buddha himself went through on the night of his enlightenment, as we can see in a number of suttas, for example, in the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 4. So in the sutta, the Buddha says that in the first phase of the night, he attained his recollection of his own past lives. In the middle phase of the night, he acquired what's called the divine eye, by which he could see how living beings pass away and take rebirth through their karma. And then in the last phase of the night, he attained the destruction of the defilements, which is the attainment of liberation. Yeah, so in this system, we have the 3 clear knowledges, the 3 vijja, but strictly speaking, the first 2 knowledges are not necessary for liberation. Yeah, strictly speaking, the only one that's absolutely required is the 3rd knowledge, the knowledge of the destruction of the defilements. But the other 2 knowledges can still play an important role in preparing the mind for that final knowledge of liberation. Faulty is better. Yeah, I think the way these other 2 knowledges contribute to the process is by strengthening the conviction about the faulty nature of life and samsara. So when you see your many past lives going back over hundreds and thousands of lives, you see again and again how you take birth, then you have to, when you get the age of 5 or 6, you have to go to school. When you finish school, you maybe start a job, maybe you fall in love and get married, and you have children. And then at the end, you grow old, you fall sick, and you die. Like, like I myself, when I was a child, I was very short. And so when I went to school, then I was very often the victim of the bully, the class bully. So if somebody says to me, do you want to go back to school and start over in elementary school and have to face the bully again? I say no. And if somebody says to me, you're going to have to do that 100 times, 1,000 times, I think no. Of course, then when you get to be maybe a young man, young woman, you fall in love and everything is so beautiful and wonderful. But then there comes, I'm sorry, quarrels with your husband or wife, and then the children that you brought up don't really pay much attention to you. And then you do that over and over. Okay, so that's the first knowledge. And then with the second knowledge, this is the divine eye, you see other beings passing away, dying, and taking rebirth. And you see so many who might fall from the human realm or even the heavenly realms. You might see the very rich businessman or the powerful politician who has the whole country under his grip. He passes away and he's down in the hills.
Yeah.
Or if taking rebirth, he lifts up his head and goes, woof, woof, reborn as a dog in the animal realm. Yeah, so the second knowledge gives one a sense of the dangers in samsara. Okay, so now let us look at the text of the sutta. Okay, so now the Buddha, he picks up and he says, when his concentrated mind is thus purified, bright, and so on, he directs it to knowledge of the recollection of past lives. So this is the mind that has been developed or purified in the fourth jhana. To gain this knowledge, the meditator has to come out from the jhana. But the mind is still very powerful, very bright. And then one turns the mind back to try to recollect one's past lives. And then the text says that one can recollect, remember one's many past lives, from one birth to two births, even up to hundreds of births, thousands of births. And then he says, even you can recollect many lives over past aeons. The aeon, or in Pali, the word is kappa, or Sanskrit kalpa. So this is the measurement of cosmic time in Indian thought. So this would be like probably like billions of years, many billions of years. And then as one recollects one's past lives, one is able to see some of the details, like one's name, one's clan, what one looked like, what kind of food one ate, one's experience of pleasure and pain, and how long you lived. Okay, so it said that in detail, one recollects one's many past lives. And as I said before, well, as you're recollecting these many past lives, you see how much, especially here, your experience of pleasure and pain. You can see how much, not only pleasure, but how much pain you had to undergo in these many past lives. And when you see all of this pleasure and pain, especially the pain, then it gives a sense of dissatisfaction with samsara, with the round of rebirth. And it generates a strong desire for liberation. Okay, so this is the first knowledge mentioned here. And now the second knowledge mentioned in the sutta is the knowledge of the passing away and rebirth of beings. This is other beings. Yeah, so again, this knowledge is based on the mastery over the fourth jhana. And so through practicing the fourth jhana over and over, one gains a power of samadhi, of deep concentration. And then the mind becomes very, the sutta uses this expression, malleable, wieldy, and steady. And so then one takes that concentrated mind and one directs it to knowledge of the passing away and rebirth of beings. And this kind of knowledge, or the faculty that can exercise this kind of knowledge, is called the divine eye. You know, when you look in a work like the Visuddhimagga, this is a Pali Buddhist commentarial work, the path of purification, it gives actually detailed instructions on how to develop the divine eye. Yeah, if I remember what the Visuddhimagga says is that one develops the jhana on the basis of the, what is called the perception of light. And so one gains first an inward perception of very bright, radiant light. And then after you master that inward vision of light, you can then send the light outward into the world. And that light will illuminate, will light up other realms of existence. So you could see the many different realms of existence. Yeah, so that inner vision, that is called the divine eye. And then with that divine eye, one can then see how other living beings pass away and take rebirth elsewhere. And one sees them taking rebirth under different conditions, some inferior, others superior, some are beautiful, others are ugly, some are fortunate, wealthy, powerful, and others are unfortunate. And then on this basis, then one understands how beings pass on from life to life according to their actions, or the word here is karma. Okay, so the basic principle is explained here. So those beings, or you could say people, who behaved wrongly by way of body, speech, and mind, and so on. So with the breakup of the body after death, they are reborn in a bad destination, in a lower world in hell, or maybe in hell. While those who behave well or rightly by way of their bodily actions, speech, and thoughts, who hold right views and who act on the basis of right views, after death, they get reborn in a good destination. Okay, so this passage describes the workings of karma. And to understand it, we need a little bit of background in the Buddhist view of the universe. And so, according to the early Buddhist teaching, there are 5 realms of existence. So 3 are considered bad destinations. These are the realms of misery. We have the hells, the realm of the ghosts, and the animal realm. And then 2 are considered good destinations. These are realms of relative happiness. That is the human realm and the heavenly realms. And then what governs the process of rebirth is our karma, so that bad karma, let's say bad conduct, bad actions creates bad karma, leading to a rebirth in the lower realms. Well, good conduct, good activities creates good karma, leading to rebirth in the good destinations. So that is the second of the three higher knowledges. Okay, but rebirth, according to the Buddha's teaching, rebirth into all of these realms is impermanent. Well, we say life in all these realms is impermanent and therefore ultimately unsatisfactory. So even the highest heavens, according to the Buddha, are not satisfactory. You might get reborn and into the highest heaven, and you're enjoying your time there, experiencing great bliss and happiness. For maybe thousands and thousands of years, perfect bliss in the heavens. And then you hear, then you ask, what is that? And somebody says, your time is up. What's next? Well, we've looked at your karmic record and we see that you have to go down to the animal realm. And so for the Buddhism, the aim is to be liberated from all of these realms of existence in samsara. And that means, in effect, to attain nibbana or nirvana. And so to attain liberation or nibbana, one has to find out what are the most fundamental causes that maintain existence in samsara. And so as we look into the most fundamental causes of samsara, the Buddha sort of sums them up in what he calls the asavas. Yeah, it's a bit difficult to translate the word asava into English. Yeah, the word is based on the verb savati, which means to flow. Yeah, so the asavas are these mental defilements that flow into the mind. And so the final goal of the path, the Buddha's path, is the destruction of the asavas. And that is equivalent to arahatship. Yeah, now generally, arahatship is reached in stages. You just don't jump from the level of ordinary person to arhat all at once. Yeah, so the texts distinguish 4 levels on the way to arahatship. Yeah, I won't go into them in detail, but we have these. Yeah, so we have these 3 preliminary stages: stream entry, the stage of the once returner, the stage of the non-returner. And at each stage, one eliminates certain fetters or defilements and reduces the number of rebirths remaining until at the final stage of arhatship, one eliminates the subtlest fetters. And at the stage of arhatship, there's no rebirth anywhere in any realm. So the arhat is one who attains the ultimate nibbana, which is also called the deathless state. Okay, and all of these stages have to be reached not just through samadhi or concentration, but through insight or wisdom. And the way I sometimes illustrate this is that you could think of the moon, and at the stage of stream entry, It's like the time when the moon is 1/4 full, 1/4 bright, and 3/4 are in darkness. So with the stage of stream entry, you could say wisdom has been developed to 25% and ignorance is reduced to 75%. Yeah, at the stage of once returner, the wisdom is developed still more. So this is like the moon when it's half bright, half dark. So at this stage, wisdom is developed 50% and ignorance is reduced to 50%. Okay, but the practitioner has to go on developing insight still more till one reaches the stage of non-returner. So this is like the moon when it's 3/4 bright, but still 1/4 dark. So here wisdom has been developed to 75% and ignorance is reduced to 25%. Yeah, so even in a non-returner, there is still some ignorance remaining. And so the non-returner has to continue to develop insight until one reaches the stage of arhatship. And at the stage of arhatship, this is like the stage when the moon is the full moon on the 15th of the fortnight, when the moon is completely bright. Yeah, then at this point, then wisdom is 100% developed and ignorance is completely gone. So those are the 4 stages of attainment. Okay, now in the discourse on the elephant's footprint, the Buddha doesn't divide the attainment into these different stages. I think this is because he wants just to show the final stage of realization. And so he's combined them all or joined them all together into just to one passage. Okay, and then in the text, he shows what is the actual knowledge that brings about the destruction of the asavas, of the taints. And he states the kind of knowledge very concisely as the direct understanding of the 4 noble truths. So one has to understand first the noble truth of suffering or dukkha, its origin or the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path to the cessation of suffering. Okay, but then we have the formula for the 4 noble truths repeated a second time, but now the subject is not dukkha or suffering, but the subject are the taints or the asavas themselves. Yeah, this is my own interpretation why the suttas state the 4 noble truths in 2 ways, by way of suffering and by way of the asavas. Yeah, in my understanding, the statement of the 4 noble truths by way of suffering is intended to show the 3 lower stages of realization: stream entry, once returner, non-returner. Whereas the second statement by way of the asavas, this is intended to show the knowledge bringing the 4th stage of realization, the stage of arhatship. Okay, so this passage here shows the knowledge, the type of, it's a direct knowledge, not just intellectual knowledge. It shows the kind of knowledge that brings the liberation of the mind. But then the next section shows the actual liberation of the mind. Okay, so now as the disciple is knowing and seeing the 4 noble truths, seeing them at ever deeper levels, then the mind is liberated from the asavas. So you could see from the text that there are three asavas: the asava of sensual craving, the asava of craving for existence, and the asava of ignorance. Okay, so as one is knowing and seeing the Four Noble Truths, then the mind is liberated from each of these asavas, from this craving for sensual pleasures, craving for repeated existence, and from ignorance. Okay, so this section, number 26, describes the event of liberation. But after the event of liberation takes place, there comes a kind of knowledge that looks back upon the mind and realizes the mind is now liberated. And so with this knowledge, sometimes called reviewing knowledge, the disciple knows that the asavas, the defilements, have been destroyed. And then one understands that birth is finished, that the cycle of rebirths has been brought to an end, that the holy life has been lived. In other words, that one has completed the practice of the path, that what had to be done has been done, and there is no more coming back to any state of existence in the round of rebirths. Okay, so in using the analogy or the simile of the elephant's footprint, the Buddha says that at this point, the simile of the elephant's footprint has been completed in detail. Okay, and then just at the end of the sutta, then the Brahmin Janusoni expresses his delight to the Buddha and says, "Magnificent Master Gautama, magnificent Master Gautama." And then he goes for refuge to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And then he declares himself a lay follower for the rest of his life. Okay, so that will conclude our presentation of the sequential training, and we have some time for questions.
We have some questions in our chat.
Yeah.
Talking about the first knowledge, is it clear how exactly the person sees his previous lives as a bystander or experiencing it personally as in a present, as if in a present moment? Does it also apply to the moments in the womb and early childhood and so on?
Yeah, there's actually a simile that occurs in some other suttas to illustrate each of the three higher knowledges. And so for the knowledge of recollection of past lives, the Buddha gives a simile of a man who might go from his own village to another village, and then goes to still another village. And then after he returns to his own village, he can recollect the different villages that he passed through on his travels. Yeah, I'm not sure whether that simile helps answer the question very, very well. Okay, but the path of purification, the Visuddhimagga, gives more detailed instruction on how to recollect one's past lives. Okay, so I'll just try to summarize briefly the Visuddhimagga explanation. Okay, first one attains and dwells for some time in the fourth jhana. Okay, then one comes out from the jhana, but the mind is still very bright and powerful. And so one turns the mind back and starts trying to remember the different things one did earlier today before you sat for meditation. And then you go back to what you did yesterday, the day before, until you start going quickly through all of the events of one's life. It's a little bit like with the old tape recorders when you press rewind. Okay, then eventually you get to the time of your birth, the moment of separation from the womb in this life. And then you go back further to the time of the womb up to the moment of conception. And then it's said that you sort of come up against a wall that you can't break through. But you keep on pushing and sharpening the mind with more jhana attainment. And then at some point, that wall collapses and you come back, the mind comes back to the previous life. And then once you master this with one life, then you can keep on going back to more and more past lives. Yeah, so that is the way it's described in the Visuddhimagga. Okay, we'll go on with the questions.
Okay, next question. Why some animals or pets
Yeah,
live a better life than some people?
yeah, I see that the next comment pretty much answers that question. This is from Tong Bang. Norinthi says, the pet was generous in his previous life, but lacked other merits. So because he lacked other merits, he didn't take rebirth as a human, but the merits of generosity bring the good conditions. Yeah, so that would be a reasonable explanation. Of course, I can't say for certain.
And I have a question here, not in the chat.
Yeah.
How can we determine exactly that a person is at this or that stage of awakening?
Yeah.
Can we determine that?
I think it's very difficult to tell, and I never make it any of a major concern of mine to be able to tell whether this person has reached this level, that person has reached that level. And it's very easy to be, let's say, to misinterpret one's own experience and think one has reached a certain level that one hasn't reached. So I always say that one has to just keep on watching one's own mind, not watching other people, and watch one's own mind for manifestations of greed, ill will, and delusion, and then make efforts to reduce them and overcome them. Okay, next question.
Okay. Is the possibility is the possibility to obtain any stage of enlightenment in this life determined somehow by the karma, despite of all the person's efforts right in this life?
Yeah, I would say that there's so many factors involved. So there's the factor of karma is one contributing factor. Another contributing factor is what comes to be called the paramis. These are a little different from karma, but it's the accumulations of good qualities, of spiritual virtues through past practice. And those create let's say, the supporting conditions for attainment, for reaching the stages of enlightenment. And then there's the aspiration or wish, and then there's the personal effort.
I have a question here. Suppose a person has already become a stream enterer in a
Yeah,
past life,
yeah,
or the one before last, and before past, and in this life he or she practices the dharma, will he or she again first reach the first stage of awakening, or immediately go to the second in his or her practice?
Yeah, once one reaches one of those stages of attainment, and then so this person reaches stream entry and then takes rebirth back into the human world, they don't have to go. I mean, it's not possible to go back to the attainment of stream entry.
Mm.
But instead, once the person sort of, I guess at a certain point, they might realize that they're a stream enterer, and then they can take up the practice of Dhamma. Then they will be aspiring for and attain the next stage they attain will be once returning. They
Mhm.
don't go back and attain stream entry again.
Mhm. Okay. The four jhanas are right immersion, uh, which is a part of the Eightfold Noble Path, which is the part of enlightenment. So,
Yeah.
how could some be an arahant without attaining those four? Maybe this is just an alternate and much
Yeah.
harder path.
Okay, so in several suttas which give definitions of the eight path factors, right immersion, I don't know that word, but what we know are right concentration, sama
Mhm,
samadhi,
mhm,
is defined as the four jhanas. And so if one sort of holds very tightly to the wording of the text, you would say, you see, the four the four jhanas are part of the Noble Eightfold Path, so you can't reach any attainment without the four jhanas. But we find other suttas in which a monk comes to the Buddha and asks for advice, and the Buddha gives an explanation or gives the instruction entirely in terms of insight practice without mentioning the attainment of the jhanas.
mhm.
And then the sutta says that then that monk, after receiving those instructions from the Buddha, went off to practice and attained arhatship. And so it seems that suttas like that are the basis for the idea that comes in the commentaries of the dry insight arhat, one who attains arhatship just through the power of wisdom without jhana. And then the Satipatthana Sutta also doesn't mention the attainment of jhanas, but it says that one who practices according to the four foundations of mindfulness can attain arhatship in this very life.
Venerable mentioned about the different types of attainments to our arahantship. Could Venerable provide guidance on where I might find these in the suttas?
Okay, the arhats with six kinds of higher knowledge, you find those mentioned particularly in the first part of the Digha Nikaya, maybe the Samanyapala Sutta, that's Digha Nikaya Sutta number 2. You'll find them elaborated. And then there are several suttas in the Digha Nikaya, in the Majjhima Nikaya, which speak about the arhat with six higher knowledges. Maybe number 73, but I'm not completely sure. Okay, then for the distinction between arhats liberated by wisdom and those liberated in both ways, maybe the most explicit sutta is number 70 in the Majjhima Nikaya. And then also in the Digha Nikaya, the long discourses, sutta number 15. And then as I mentioned, the dry insight arhat is not explicitly mentioned in the technique in the suttas, but there are some suttas which suggest the idea of the dry insight arhat. Yeah, the dry insight arhat is mentioned explicitly in works like the Sutti Magga and in the Pali commentaries. Okay, we'll have to end now. So we'll end with the sharing of the merits. So thank you everybody for joining us this morning or today, and thank you to Oleg for the translation. Okay, so I'm going to recite the verses to share the merits. Akasa ta chabuma ta deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirangra kantu sasanam. Akasa ta chabuma ta deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirangra kantu desanam. Akasa ta chabuma ta deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva Chirangra kantu mang parang dukkha pata chani dukkha bhaya pata chani bhaya soka pata chani soka antu sabepi panino. And then we could end with 3 bows to the Buddha. Okay, 1, 2, 3.